Madison Cawthorn is still in this particular vein of thought, but I was a little surprised by this, as he has generated, or at least his antics have generated, a couple few Republican challengers potentially they're gonna primary him, as they see him being a little bit more ineffective and potentially weak as he goes into this next election, just because of the way he's going across the country. And then he is kind of going across the country, but now around the state, just looking for different ways to promote himself and not really talk about his constituents. Let's jump right in this from the Daily Boost. They did report that there are 4 new Republican challengers that are jumping up to get him, as I mentioned. And this even part of this recent hurricane and tropical storms that have hit them, he's kind of ignoring it. Let's go straight into this graphic. It wasn't until a few weeks ago after the storm that just hit, after Cawthorn had criticized President Biden over the withdrawal from Afghanistan, he called the Democratic governor of his state, again, as he mentioned in this last piece when he was at the school board meeting, a tyrant, warned his followers about authoritarian school boards, and he crowed that he would rather be hated by the mainstream media and the DC swamp if that means I'm loved by the patriotic Americans across this country. And so that's when Cawthorn began to communicate about the storms and the flooding and the mudslides and everything that had happened. He kind of gets off track for what he wants to focus on because he's too busy going for the big names, the Bidens, and then let's go for the governor of the state when talking about these things. But you got to talk about how we're gonna recover. There was a storm that hit people. There's people who lost property, people who were devastated, potential lack of life, loss of life that happened here. But people noticed those types of things. So I think the Republican Party did notice this as well. So one more part of this, when Cawthorn did finally get around to tweeting about the storm and its damage, he chose to retweet some general government guidance about cleanup and to post pictures of himself handing out meals to first responders and speaking with constituents. This is where the weakness comes in. This is where some of these potential challengers are seeing some openings. Do you see some openings here? He still might win, but at least there's people that are thinking about challenging him now. That's a little unprecedented when it comes to Republicans.
I think you make a great point. It is somewhat unprecedented. And the other part about it is when I hear you talk about him, handing out masks to first responders, I'm thinking, well, wait a second, these masks are supposed to be disinfected to begin with. Now they're infected. Now the masks are not clean because you got this guy who doesn't believe in vaccinations or mask mandates or whatever, and his dirty little grubby hands all over these masks. If I'm one of these first responders, I'm like, no, I'll take one out of the bag, thank you.
Yeah, and it's the thing. I want to get some quotes from one of his challengers, Eric Batchelor. It's a fun name. It's one of those things that'll stick with you when you're trying to run for office. It's one of the pillars of it. You have to have a recognizable name. Anyway, Eric Batchelor, he's a retired US Army lieutenant colonel, and he's a current sheriff's deputy. Now, this is what he had to say about Cawthorn's approach and what he thinks he has an opening as far as taking over here. Being a representative is about being a representative to this district. It's not about flying around the country, raising national campaign dollars and searching for the next photo op. It's about being here in this district. Again, you would think this would be a Democratic challenger coming for him. No. This is from one of the potential Republican challengers to primary him. So also, Broadley, who wrote the original article, he concedes that Cawthorn is still as an odds-on favorite to win this. But when you start seeing little chips and people throwing a couple daggers at him, it's just not a good sign. Also, lastly, there's one GOP operative that told the Daily Beast that Trump, who won his district by 12 points in 20, who still polls there, and Cawthorn has also effectively cultivated that to support his base. His challengers don't have a real chance if Cawthorn stays on his current track and doesn't make any major mistakes. There's always a chance for major mistakes. Honestly, I think this is one of the major mistakes, is looking like you kind of don't care about your constituents. And you have a guy who's a lieutenant colonel and sheriff's deputy, and he's actually talking about the constituents. We'll see.
Jayar, you know politics well. You got it right on the money there. I mean, there are always the possibility of mistakes, and particularly if it looks like you don't care about the district, as you just pointed out. And the fact of the matter is, if you look so craven as Madison Cawthorn does, the fact that there are some Republicans who are saying, you know what, I might challenge this guy, that in and of itself is a pretty dramatic story and something worth watching.
Are you gonna watch it? I'm gonna watch it.
I think the Republican civil war that's going on is fascinating.
We're gonna find out if he actually listens to what's happening or sees it and then changes up his approach, and maybe that'll save him to a degree.